There are 8 terms you must know if you are a beginner in TFT. Maybe you played a couple of games, read a few guides, but some terminology might be a little bit tricky in TFT.
Explain yourself.
And we're going to clear that up today in around 10 minutes. So let's put on our seatbelt and we'll cover all the basic concepts in TFT to turn you from a TFT novice into a savvy tactician. The first thing we want to go over is the economy, or Econ, as some people like to abbreviate. It's pretty much all about money management. Just like in real life, in TFT, you need to worry about that too. And we also have great concepts such as interest. Essentially, after every single round, you get bonus gold, and interest is one way to get even more. So every 10 gold you bank up, you get 1 gold per round, up to 5 total bonus gold. So if you have 50 gold, you get 5, and then saving past that doesn't really get you any more. While having 50 gold is great, getting there is pretty difficult, and you need to start saving early. Because when you're only getting 1 interest gold per turn, plus the general gold you get every single round, it's a little hard to get all the way up there. Luckily, there are other things such as win streaks and lose streak bonus gold, which gets you even more bonus gold by winning or losing multiple rounds in a row. And mastering this game's economy is pretty much the best way to get better at the game. Unfortunately, it's kind of like a balancing act. You can't save up the entire time and get infinite gold because other people who do spend their gold will on average have stronger teams and hit you by dealing damage to your health. So you have to find a lot of ways of balancing using your gold along with saving it in order to maximize your usage of it in game. We'll get more into this topic on a lot of my other videos, including a leveling guide that's going to be coming out in the next couple of days, so definitely look out for that if you need more information. But in the meantime, you could check out a lot of the guides that are already out there on my website, bunnymuffins.lol, if you need to access these right away. Next, I want to talk about comps. Comps is just short for compositions. We really love abbreviating things in TFT. And from an outside perspective, your comp is probably the most important thing in the game because that's your team at the end of the day. Some people also call it decks. Some people call it builds, but they all refer to the same thing. Most people say comps though. In order to build a good comp, you need to have good synergy.
Peanut butter cup, Dorito sausage, car panini. And let's crack a Cadbury egg over the whole thing.
Just like any other games, you want to diversify and have a mix of frontline, backline, healers, utility units, damage units, anything under the sun that you could think of. That way you don't have any glaring weaknesses to your team, and you should be able to win a couple of rounds with that. The ways to get even more powerful after you fill out the bare basics is to load out on certain stats by either filling in a big synergy, using key units, or building great items to complement your team. This could be a pretty daunting task to handle because there are around like 59 champions. I don't even know how many items there are, but there are a ton. And then you can mix and match the items, the champions, and all the augments and other bonuses you get within the game in order to come out with a final team that's strong at every single point in the game. Obviously, this is a very difficult task, and everything I've been saying has been pretty complicated if you are new to TFT. Luckily, every single Friday, I update a tier list, which has information on how to build all the major comps in the game right now. Again, it's going to be a great starting point if you want to find out more, but you don't have to yet if you're a complete beginner. We're just going over the terms right now. The next term we're going to go over is pivoting. So pivoting is one of the ways to kind of make the most of a bad situation in TFT, because there are a lot of different directions you could go in when you're playing the game. A lot of people don't think of TFT as a card game, but that really is what it is. You cannot control your draw. So even if you are a master at one type of strategy, if the champions you want don't show up in your shop, it's going to be really hard to win in those games. That's why pivoting and staying flexible is very, very important. Always make the most of what appears in your shops. Always keep track of what your opponents are playing so that you can see what's already taken out, because the way TFT works is that there are a limited amount of champions in the pool. So if someone takes all of the Akalis, for example, there are some scenarios where you can't get any copies of her yourself. People like to say the word pivot because a lot of times people like to force certain comps, which means they only play one comp every single time. But again, that doesn't always work, so people kind of use the word pivot to signal that they're kind of deviating from their original strategy. Next up, I want to talk about the Carousel. The Carousel is a stage in the game which has kind of evolved through the past couple of sets. At the midpoint of every stage, you're able to pick an item and a champion on a rotating carousel. It's a great comeback mechanic for a lot of people who are finding themselves in a pickle at the start of the game because the people with the lowest health get to pick first. Unfortunately though, just because you are the lowest life doesn't mean you always get the items you want, because carousels change up in terms of the items they offer and the champions they offer almost every single time. You also pick in pairs, so the 2 lowest health people pick at the same time. So even if you are the lowest health person, again, the other person is picking at the same time as you and could take what you want. Usually when you're on the carousel, you want to prioritize the item over the champion. What I like to do is I like to pick an item component that completes an item that I want that's already on my bench, and I don't really try to think of the future that much. Playing for the now in TFT is something that's super important, and as you get more and more advanced and watch some of my other guides, you'll notice that I love playing for what's called tempo and trying to remain strong at all points in the game as much as possible. Next, I want to go over itemization. Items are super important in TFT because they make your champions a lot better, and I mean a lot. Items are one of the most important things ever. They define who your main carry is, they define who your main tank is, but you also have to figure out how to build items. I have some good news though. If you don't know what item to build or what components build which items, you can right-click on an item component to figure out what items you could build based on what you have already. Again, you could also check out the guide on my website that I update every single week to see which items are best on which champions and also know which champions to itemize. Keep in mind though, sometimes the best item for your specific situation isn't always the best item in the entire game because that always changes based on what champion you are using. If you haven't noticed yet, being adaptive is a super important thing in TFT. Next up we have is scouting. Scouting is very underrated and a lot of people don't do it. And the main reason why they don't do it is because people are generally quite lazy when it comes to playing a game. That means scouting is one decent way to get an advantage over your opponents without much effort. When you're checking out your opponent's boards, you can see what units are going for, what traits are going for, so you know what to avoid so you don't get contested. And you could also figure out how to position against certain players by countering them with your own positioning. You could figure out who you're facing in the next round by looking at the sword icons on the right-hand side, because you will always face an opponent with a sword there. Next up we have is positioning. It's kind of what we talked about before. Countering your opponents are great, but there are general good positioning tactics. If you have no idea what to do, you can always right-click one of your units and the game recommends kind of where to place them already. They either say front or back along with the range of the unit, but typically you want to put your melee units in the front and your range units in the back. Same with any game. There's another easier way to do this. If the unit looks pretty delicate, they generally belong in the back. If they look really buff, or if they look like they can take a hit, obviously up in the front is going to work out great. Other things to look for is knowing what type of spells your units have. Some units have great area of effect abilities, so you want them kind of in the center of the action so that they hit more people. Some units have great crowd control abilities, so you want them on the same sides as the opponent's carries. Some units have big range, some units have small range, some can even hit the entire map, in which case their positioning doesn't really matter, so you always have to try to figure out what works best for each unit in every single type of team. If you want to know more about the abilities of each unit, head on over to the database at teamfight.lol, where you can find information on every single champion. The last thing I want to talk about is rolling. One of the most popular questions is asking me what I mean by slow roll, re-roll, and hyper roll. But before we get into that, I want to talk about what rolling is. Rolling is the act of spending gold to refresh the champion shop. It's kind of like a gamble and it's a way to kind of get a new draw. However, if you econ properly like we talked about before, you'll have a lot of rolls in order to hit your desired team. All you have to do is know when to roll and when to save like we talked about before. Also, when rolling, you need to know what level is going to be best to roll at. Champions appear based on their rarity and your level. Cheaper champions show up more often at earlier levels and more expensive champions show up more often at later levels. Obviously, timing this is crucial because oftentimes I see a lot of people roll down for units when they have horrible odds to get them. But essentially, rolling is just refreshing your shop. The hotkey is D. It normally costs 2 gold, but what is reroll, slow roll, and hyper roll? Rerolling is generally just a leveling strategy that revolves getting 9 copies of a unit, which some people call a 3-star unit, and it's often done through rolling aggressively at a specific level. Slow rolling is a subset of rerolling, and this means you roll down every single turn, looking for a specific unit until you reach 50 gold. After that, you stop, wait for the next round, get the gold that you always get after the end of the round, and then roll down to 50 again. You rinse and repeat this until you hit your desired units. People do this because it's often the most optimal way to increase the odds of hitting a certain unit, and getting 3-starred units is one way to get a lot of power within the game. On the contrary, we have hyper rolling, which is another subset of re-rolling, but very different from slow rolling. It involves aggressively rolling down your gold until you hit your desired units. you don't really care about getting the interest gold because you really just need to get your units no matter what the cost is. This is often done with 1 cost units on stage 3-1. And there you have it. We've covered 8 crucial terms, and now you're ready to jump right back into the game or check out some of my other guides to get a little bit more in depth. Just remember that every game is a fresh start, but just like with any game involving luck or RNG, you have to adapt to overcome the challenges that you see in the game. If this guide has helped you get a grip on the basics of TFT, obviously, I would appreciate it if you hit the like button below and subscribe for more guides that are coming out in the future. And if you do have any questions, drop a comment down below and let me know if this video helped you or maybe it was a waste of time.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Lastly, if you want to get a refresher on everything that we talked about in this video, head on over to my website, bunnymuffins.lol. I'll leave a link to this post in the description below. But that's it for me today. Hope to see you all tomorrow, where I'll be releasing my complete beginner guide to TFT.